So we're going to set up a MAMP server, Microsoft Apache MySQL PHP, on our local computer so that our local computer, my laptop in this case, whatever computer you own and are using to do your web development, can function as a server in the same way that our AWS EC2 is a server for our WordPress website. And it's worth mentioning before we start that WordPress itself uh, can be installed on a MAMP or WAMP server. So I'm going to go through the Microsoft setup. The Mac setup is almost exactly the same. I'll try and flag any differences as I go through so you know about them. Alright, let's get started. So first we want to go to the MAMP official web page. So there's MAMP and MAMP Pro. We can go to their downloads page directly. So this is the page we want to be in. If we click download, we have a Mac Windows option. Let's go ahead and download that. It'll download an exe file. It installs MAMP Pro alongside MAMP, but MAMP Pro is actually a paid service, so what we want is we're just going to be using MAMP. So when that downloads, we will begin the setup. Okay, so we have got the exe, and it should be firing up right now. Alright. So what I have, right, okay. So first the setup language, we'll pick English. So we want, we can go ahead and set up MAMP Pro too in case we ever want to use it. I'm just going to go through this with all the default settings like you will. So it's going to set it up in our C drive under MAMP, that's fine. And I've already done this once, so I'm just going to do that. Let's get a desktop icon going and install. Okay, we are just about done with the install and the extraction for MAMP Pro. Alright, finish. Okay, and so now I have two desktop items, one for MAMP and one for MAMP Pro. I'm just going to double click on that. If you want to find these in Windows, you just search for MAMP and there it is. So MAMP is the one that we want. It's going to look like this, and you can see it automatically started up my servers. So now we can open our start page, and our website's going to appear on localhost, and it's telling us that's our server name, localhost, and this is where our document root is. So there's nothing in there right now except for their default index and logo. So one of the cool things that this allows us to do is run PHP code, server-side code, on our local computer, and then go to our local computer's IP in a browser and see that the results of that PHP code running on our computer. So otherwise we would have to go to our EC2 instance and have PHP code running there. PHP is only going to run on the server, so we need a server set up in order to use it. So I'll show you a little bit of PHP. a little trick to get one variable for your nav bar, so you don't have to keep copying and pasting code, just to illustrate how this works. But for now, let's just notice that this is our document root, and that, just like in AWS when we had var/www/html, and that was where we put our website files, so that when people went to our IP, they saw those files. This is going to be our location for our website files on our local computer. So let's put some files there. So I'm going to go to C, MAMP, htdocs. Okay. So I already have a lot of files there. So let's then, oops. Let's see what this index.php is. Alright, so that is their default index, so I'm going to get rid of that. These files right here are my website files that I had already on my web server. So let's go ahead and put a new index in there. So what I'm going to do is open Dreamweaver and go to site. Let's make a new site and hook it into our server. So new site, local site, I'll just call it, and let's give it a location. So its location is going to be htdocs. Select that folder. We could, if we wanted, associate a Git repository at this point too, which is a good idea, so you can back up your code, and you do that the same way you associated a Git repository with your EC2 site. I've already got one associated with that folder, so it's not allowing me that option here because it knows it's already a Git repository. So next I'm going to go to servers, and we're going to add a server, and our connection here is going to be our local network connection. And we can give it any name. I'm just going to call it local server, and then for the folder we want to select that root location in htdocs, like that. For the web URL, we're just going to type localhost and save. Alright. It's going to scan and update the site cache. So we will now have Dreamweaver able to run PHP code that's running on our local host, and see that PHP code in live view. Alright, so we have our, let me put this up here. Yeah. So we have our local site, right, and that's fine. Well, let's go to local view. Alright, so here we are. If we wanted, because we have the server running, we can connect to it, and that's going to allow us to see the PHP code. So we don't have an index right now, so I'm going to go ahead and drag in my index.php right there. We can take a look at that. It's going to say some files cannot be discovered because the testing server is not defined. Let's set that up. So we can make that local as well, give it the same root. This step isn't necessary, but if you wanted a testing server, you could have a copy of all your websites and maybe have like a little testing folder in here. And then before you made permanent changes, push them to your testing server. Because we're using Git version control, I'm not too worried about that. Alright. So now it's saying this page has dynamically related files that can only be discovered by the server. So let's tell it to discover those files. Alright, so now let's go to split, and we can see that we now have my website here with the nav bar and everything. And the nav bar, you'll notice, and the header are actually PHP code. This require once and this other require once for the header.php and nav.php is actually pulling those files, like pulling chunks of HTML into the index right at this point. So this is PHP code right here, and the reason that I can run it as PHP code is that I've named this file index.php. So the .php extension tells the browser that we're dealing with a PHP file and there's going to be some PHP code rather than index.html. And that will automatically get loaded when anyone goes to the root directory, just like index.html automatically gets loaded. So what's happening here is, and this is the trick I was telling you about, where we can have one piece of code, the header and the nav bar, that we, with all our links and with this nav bar right here, that we just load into every page. So the first thing I'm doing is tracking this page. This is a sign for a variable, this $sign, and the variable is called this page in PHP. And I'm setting that equal to home. So it's a string variable. Then I am requiring once the header.php. Let's see what that is. So here's my header.php file. And all it is a bunch of meta tags, a title for my website, and my links to Bootstrap. And you'll see it's not even a complete like HTML file, it's just a head tag element. The nav bar is very similar. Again, it's a PHP file. That's what allows me to import it into index on load. And it just starts with a div called nav. And all I'm doing, and this is just normal HTML, like a chunk of HTML, except for these little PHP tags. And so anytime you want to run PHP code, you can run it anywhere in HTML. You just have to have this opening bracket, opening tag and a question mark, and then the PHP letters, and then a question mark and a closing tag. Okay, so so that's just a chunk of HTML with a little bit of PHP for debugging scattered in. But the important part is that I'm just importing a div and it's just this div right here. And you can see Bootstrap's not working because the links to Bootstrap are in the header PHP right here. So the index needs both, and it's importing both right as soon as the page starts, so before the body tag. So that, and you'll notice too at the bottom here I have another PHP file for my footer. So why do it this way? Well, if we look at the nav bar here and take a look at some of these links, so like here to get to Gim home, right, this one right here, what I'm doing is I'm sending you to the the user to the href danielandpeking.com/gimclassprep/index.php. So if we go to that file, we would have to, which is here, and then here, we would have to copy and paste all that code, and we'd have to update the links so that we could link out of that folder back to home if somebody clicked home if we didn't use this trick. But instead, we can just require the same header to get Bootstrap again and the same nav bar to get this nice nav bar right here. So that's PHP and how to write and run a very basic but very useful PHP function, the require once function. So the reason we can see that PHP is that we have our servers running. If we stopped the servers, it's going to break the PHP code we have running. So, and Dreamweaver will notify us that the server is not running. All right, so let's start our servers again. Now that we have a lot of code in here. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you wanted to get the code off of your EC2 and pull it into your new local MAMP server, here's how you do that. So I have my htdocs, right? There's my EC2 instance, so I'd connect to that, and then I would just go to var/www/html and grab all that code and just pull it over. So we can do this with a smaller piece of code maybe, and it's going to let me know that there's a file in that destination already. That's fine. So it's as easy as that to transfer your files from from your AWS EC2 to your local computer using a MAMP a MAMP server. Now, one thing to note is that while you can transfer all your WordPress files, what you won't transfer with that procedure I just showed you is your database, which contains all your posts and web pages and their info and links, as well as a lot of other stuff. So transferring a database is another process. I'm not going to go into that right now. So we can reload that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down, and in a browser we can just go to localhost, and you can see that we have now that index file that I placed in there. Alright, so finally I want to show you how this computer that I'm running now, when I have my MAMP server running, is in fact a server, just like your EC2 instance. So I can actually type in the IP of my computer's address, just like your EC2 has an address, your personal computer has an address. I can type that into a browser, or on my phone, or from another computer, and as long as I'm connected to the internet, my servers are running, and my computer is on, the web stuff, the web pages I have inside of this MAMP htdocs folder are going to be visible to the world on port 80, right? So anyone in a browser can go to your computer and see the files you have here. So to get your computer's IP, you want to open a command prompt. So type command prompt, and from your command prompt type ipconfig, and that is your IP configuration details. And what you want is your IPv4 address, and this will actually change depending on the network you're on. So I am going to I guess just type that in. Alright, so we have 192.168.0.21, and we could be on a phone or whatever, and we would still see all of the files that we have inside of our index. So and just to prove that it works, let's go to Dreamweaver and let's add something to our local files in our index. So how about a nice hi everyone. That'll appear right below the introduction to myself. So now if we go back to that IP, which was that, and scroll down, we can see that that change has taken place. So that's it. That is how to set up a MAMP server. WAMP is almost exactly the same. I don't think there's any differences. And I guess, oh, there is one thing I said I was going to flag the differences. One thing is the command for finding out your IP in a Mac is ifconfig instead of ipconfig. And to get to your this the equivalent of a command prompt in a Mac, which would be your terminal, you want to just in a Mac you would type, command space terminal, or it's you can find it in utilities. And once you have a terminal open, you just type ifconfig, and it's going to appear almost identical to the ipconfig, and it'll be your IPv4 address, which is usually like halfway down in a Mac's ifconfig. So that is all I wanted to show you. Moving forward, it is up to you whether you want to develop on your EC2 instance or a local computer. I'll say one last thing and then sign off, which is that if you develop on an EC2, one advantage is that you'll always have the same IP, unless you do something strange with your console, and that means that you can point a domain at that IP and have a domain like danielmpeking.com, and you don't have to worry about like your EC2 being connected to the internet, or it being on, or it having your server running. But if you're developing on a MAMP computer, or a MAMP server or WAMP server, your computer does have to be on. You do have to have the servers running, and your IP is going to change as you move from place to place and switch networks. So that's a disadvantage. Another disadvantage is your personal computer and its limited CPU has to handle all web traffic as well as whatever you're doing on your local computer. Also, you don't have a way to, well, if you develop a test server, you can keep your files separate. And if you initialize as a Git repository, you can store backup of your files. So that's not really a problem. But with Amazon EC2s, you can scale up or down the amount of CPU you want to dedicate. You can spin up clusters of EC2s to handle like lots of traffic. So if you develop a game or web app that becomes really popular and lucrative, EC2 is the way to go. You don't want your local computer trying to handle all that traffic. That's all I wanted to do today. Thank you for listening.